Seth Rollins demands answers. Seth Rollins responds as Becky Lynch confronts Paul Heyman on Raw. Paul Heyman just crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed. What happened on Raw this week has ignited an absolute firestorm that involves Seth Rollins, Becky Lynch, Paul Heyman, and potentially the Bloodline in a situation so explosive and personal that it's making fans question whether this is brilliant storytelling or WWE going too far. Becky Lynch confronted Paul Heyman about comments he made regarding her family, and what started as a verbal confrontation turned into something that is Seth Rollins demanding answers and threatening to destroy everyone involved. But here's what's going to make your blood absolutely boil. Paul Heyman's comments about Becky and Seth's personal life and their daughter crossed from storyline into real-life territory in a way that has fans divided between those who think this is incredible drama and those who think WWE is exploiting a real family for ratings. This isn't just wrestling anymore, this is personal, and everybody involved is about to find out what happens when you drag someone's family into a wrestling storyline. Immediately, I need to know where you stand. Comment too far if you think WWE crossed a line bringing family into this, or great TV if you think this is compelling storytelling that's fair game. Because this segment has divided the wrestling world and we need to see where everyone stands. Let's break down exactly what happened on Raw, because every single word and moment matters to understanding why this has become such a controversial situation. Paul Heyman came out to cut his typical excellent promo, talking about his clients and the Bloodline's dominance. Standard Heyman stuff that we've seen dozens of times. But then Heyman started talking about legacy and family dynasties in wrestling, and that's when things took a turn. Heyman made comments about how some people in WWE talk about family and legacy but don't actually live it. He didn't name names initially, but it was obvious he was talking about Seth Rollins and Becky Lynch. Heyman talked about people who pretend to be a wrestling family but are really just using their personal relationships for sympathy and storylines. That's when Becky Lynch's music hit and the man came storming down to the ring with a look of pure rage on her face. Becky grabbed a microphone and got right in Heyman's face, telling him that he has no right to talk about her family, her daughter, or her relationship with Seth. The intensity was real and you could feel it through the screen. Becky told Heyman that he spent his entire career hiding behind other people's accomplishments, manipulating and scheming while others do the actual fighting. She called Heyman a parasite who attaches himself to powerful people and pretends their success is his success. These weren't worked-shoot comments, this felt real and personal. First reaction question: was Becky's response justified or did she overreact to Heyman's comments? Comment justified or overreacted with your take. This sets up how we evaluate the entire situation. Paul Heyman's response to Becky was chilling and showed why he's considered one of the greatest talkers in wrestling history. Instead of backing down or apologizing, Heyman doubled down. He told Becky that the truth hurts, and the truth is that she and Seth used their relationship and family as a crutch to get sympathy from fans and management. Heyman said that real legacy families like the Anoa'i family, the Bloodline, earn their status through generations of excellence, while Becky and Seth are trying to create a made-for-TV wrestling family that's all image and no substance. He said their daughter will grow up watching her parents lose big matches and fail when it matters most. That comment about their daughter is what sent this from wrestling storyline to deeply personal territory. You could see Becky's face change from angry to furious. She got even closer to Heyman, and for a moment it looked like she might actually attack him physically. Security started moving toward the ring, clearly concerned about what might happen. Becky told Heyman that he just made the biggest mistake of his life by bringing her daughter into this. She warned him that Seth Rollins is going to hear about what Heyman said, and when Seth finds out, there won't be enough security in the world to protect Heyman from what's coming. The threat in Becky's voice was absolutely real. Then Heyman made another comment that added fuel to the fire. He said that Seth Rollins is too broken down to do anything about it, that Seth is a part-timer pretending to be a full-timer, and that the Bloodline doesn't fear a man who can barely make it through a match without his body falling apart. This was a direct attack on Seth's recent injury history and his current physical condition. Heyman comments question: did Paul Heyman go too far with his comments, or is everything fair game in wrestling promos? Comment too far or fair game with your perspective on where the line should be. The segment continued with Becky challenging Heyman to bring out anyone from the Bloodline to face her right then and there. She said she'd fight any member of the Bloodline, male or female, to prove that her family has more fight than Heyman's borrowed family of manipulated wrestlers. This was Becky at her most intense and most personal. But before anyone could come out, Seth Rollins' music hit and the crowd erupted. Seth came out in street clothes, clearly not scheduled to be at Raw, but he'd obviously heard what happened and came straight to the arena. The look on Seth's face was something we rarely see. This wasn't the visionary character, this was a father and a husband who was ready to fight. Seth got in the ring and immediately went face-to-face with Paul Heyman. Seth didn't yell, didn't scream, but spoke in this quiet, intense voice that was somehow more threatening than any shouting would have been. Seth told Heyman that he's made a career out of talking, but tonight he's going to answer for what he said. Seth demanded that Heyman either apologize for bringing their daughter into this, or Seth was going to put Heyman through the announce table, through the ring, and through anything else he could find. The threat was real and you could see genuine fear in Heyman's eyes. For once, Paul Heyman looked like he realized he'd pushed someone too far. But here's where things got even more complicated. Roman Reigns' music hit and the tribal chief walked out with Solo Sikoa and the rest of the bloodline. Roman came to the ring and positioned himself between Seth and Heyman, making it clear that if Seth wanted to get to Heyman, he'd have to go through the bloodline first. Roman Reigns told Seth that he understands being protective of family. After all, Roman has built an empire on family loyalty. But Roman said that if Heyman wants to talk about Seth and Becky's family, that's Heyman's right because this is the wrestling business and nothing is off limits. Roman essentially endorsed Heyman's comments and dared Seth to do something about it. Bloodline involvement question: is the bloodline's involvement in this situation necessary or does it complicate things unnecessarily? Comment necessary or too much with your take on including the bloodline. The standoff between Seth, Becky, Heyman, Roman, and the bloodline was electric and had the crowd absolutely going insane. You could feel the tension through the screen, and everyone in that ring looked ready to explode into violence at any moment. This wasn't standard WWE storytelling, this felt dangerous and unpredictable. Adam Pearce came out with what looked like dozens of security personnel and officials to try to prevent this from turning into an all-out brawl. Pearce got on the microphone and told everyone to cool down before someone gets hurt or suspended. But nobody was listening to Pearce, all eyes were locked on each other. Seth finally spoke and said that he demands answers from Heyman, from Roman, and from anyone else involved. Seth said that Paul Heyman is going to answer for what he said, and if the bloodline wants to protect Heyman, then Seth will go through them one by one until he gets to Heyman. It was a declaration of war from Seth Rollins. Becky added that she's not going to stand behind Seth and watch, she wants a piece of this action too. Becky demanded a match against any female member of the bloodline family, and if there isn't one available, she'll fight the men. Becky was making it clear that this is her fight as much as Seth's. Roman Reigns laughed at Seth and Becky's threats and told them that if they want war with the bloodline, they're going to get it. But Roman warned them that they're outnumbered, outmatched, and out of their depth. Roman said the bloodline has destroyed everyone who's challenged them, and Seth and Becky will be no different. The segment ended with both sides being forcibly separated by security, but the looks exchanged made it clear this is far from over. Seth and Becky looked absolutely determined to get revenge. Heyman looked satisfied with the chaos he'd created. Roman looked ready for war. This is setting up something huge. Segment quality question: rate this entire segment on a scale of 1 to 10. Comment your number based on how compelling and well executed you thought this was. Now let's discuss the controversy surrounding this angle and why it has fans so divided. The biggest issue people have is whether WWE should be incorporating real-life family situations into storylines. Seth and Becky's daughter is a real child, and some fans think it's inappropriate to reference her in wrestling storylines, even indirectly. Those who defend WWE using this material argue that Seth and Becky have both talked about their family publicly, have posted about their daughter on social media, and have used their relationship as part of their wrestling personas. If they're willing to make their relationship public, then WWE should be able to reference it in storylines. But critics argue that there's a difference between wrestlers choosing to share aspects of their personal life and WWE exploiting those personal aspects for storylines. Just because Seth and Becky talk about their family doesn't mean WWE should use their daughter as a storyline device, especially in a way that could be seen as threatening or negative. The parallel to CM Punk and AJ Lee's real-life relationship being used in storylines is inevitable. WWE had Triple H make comments about CM Punk and AJ Lee that many fans thought crossed the line. That situation created massive backlash, and some fans are saying the Seth/Becky/Heyman situation is heading down the same problematic path. Personal life boundaries question: should wrestlers' real families and children ever be referenced in storylines? Comment yes if consensual, or never with your stance on this controversial issue. The performance aspects of this segment deserve recognition because everyone involved absolutely crushed it. Paul Heyman showed once again why he's the best talker in wrestling. His ability to toe the line between heel heat and legitimate discomfort is unmatched. Heyman made you hate him while also making you unable to look away. Becky Lynch's intensity was off the charts and reminded everyone why she's called the man. The fire in her eyes, the conviction in her voice, the physicality in her movements, everything about Becky's performance sold that this was personal and not just another wrestling segment. Seth Rollins showed a different side of his character that we don't often see. Seth is usually animated and expressive, but in this segment he was quiet, controlled, and somehow more threatening because of that restraint. You believed that Seth could snap at any moment and the consequences would be severe. Roman Reigns playing the role of protector for Heyman while also establishing his own dominance was perfect character work. Roman positioned himself as both powerful enough to protect Heyman and confident enough to welcome Seth's challenge. That's main event presence and character understanding. The chemistry between all the performers elevated this segment from good to great. Everyone was on the same page, everyone understood their role, and everyone committed fully to the intensity of the moment. That's what makes wrestling work at its highest level. Performer rankings question: who gave the best performance in this segment? Comment Heyman, Becky, Seth, or Roman with your pick for who stole the show. Let's analyze the storytelling implications of this angle and where it's potentially heading. The obvious direction is Seth Rollins versus Roman Reigns, with Paul Heyman's comments as the catalyst. Seth and Roman have incredible history, and this could be the story that brings them back together in a meaningful feud. But there's also the Becky Lynch component, and that opens up interesting possibilities. Does Becky get involved in Seth's matches? Does she get her own match against a bloodline member? Does WWE bring in a female member of the Anoa'i family for Becky to face? Each option creates different storytelling opportunities. The Paul Heyman factor adds complexity because Heyman isn't a wrestler who Seth can just beat up and move on. Heyman needs to be protected as a special attraction while also getting his comeuppance for what he said. That balance is tricky to achieve in wrestling booking. There's also the question of whether this leads to a bigger faction warfare situation. Do Seth and Becky recruit allies to help them fight the bloodline? Does this become a War Games match at a future premium live event? Do other wrestlers with grievances against the bloodline join Seth and Becky's cause? The potential for this to tie into other ongoing storylines is massive. Cody Rhodes has history with the bloodline. Drew McIntyre has expressed frustration with not getting opportunities. There are multiple wrestlers who could realistically join Seth and Becky in a war against the bloodline. Storyline direction question: where should this angle go from here? Comment Seth vs Roman faction war, Becky gets involved, or Heyman gets his, with your preferred direction. The social media reaction to this segment has been intense and shows just how divided wrestling fans are on controversial angles. Twitter exploded with hot takes ranging from "this is the best Raw segment in months" to "WWE needs to leave real families out of storylines." There's no consensus, just passionate opinions on both sides. Wrestling journalists and media personalities are equally split. Some are praising WWE for creating genuine emotion and investment. Others are criticizing WWE for exploiting real-life situations for storyline purposes. The lack of consensus among even wrestling experts shows how complex this situation is. Fans are creating polls asking whether this angle is appropriate, and the results are showing roughly a 50-50 split. That division is actually good for WWE in some ways because it means people are talking, debating, and staying engaged with the storyline. Controversy creates conversation, but there's also legitimate concern from some fans about the message this sends. If WWE is willing to reference wrestlers' real children in antagonistic storylines, does that set a precedent for future storylines? Does it encourage more invasive and personal angles that blur the line between character and reality? The comparison to other controversial storylines in wrestling history is inevitable. Eddie Guerrero's custody of Dominic Angle, the Katie Vick storyline, the Lita/Edge/Matt Hardy real-life situation being used on TV. WWE has a history of using controversial personal angles, with mixed results in terms of fan reception and long-term reputation. Historical comparison question: what's the most controversial personal angle in WWE history? Comment with your example of a storyline that went too far or handled real-life situations inappropriately. Let's discuss the ethical considerations of this angle, because this goes beyond just whether it's entertaining. WWE is a company with power and influence over people's careers. When WWE decides to incorporate someone's real family into storylines, those wrestlers might not feel like they can say no even if they're uncomfortable. Seth Rollins and Becky Lynch are both top stars with leverage, so they presumably had input into this storyline and could have objected if they wanted to. But what about lower-card wrestlers who might be pressured to agree to similar storylines without the same power to refuse? That's where this becomes an ethical issue. There's also the consideration of their daughter and how this might affect her as she grows up. Having your childhood referenced in wrestling storylines, even indirectly, creates a permanent record that follows you. Is that fair to a child who didn't choose to be part of the wrestling business? The counterargument is that Seth and Becky are adults who can make their own decisions about what they're comfortable with in storylines. If they approve this angle and feel comfortable with it, who are we to say it's wrong? Respecting performers' autonomy means accepting their choices even if we wouldn't make the same choices. The question of where the line is between acceptable and unacceptable storyline content is subjective and varies from person to person. Some fans think nothing should be off-limits if it creates compelling television. Others think certain aspects of real life should never be used in wrestling storylines. There's no objectively correct answer. Ethics question: should WWE have an ethics committee that reviews storylines involving personal/family content? Comment yes if you think there should be oversight, or no if you think creative freedom is more important. The business implications of this angle are worth considering because WWE makes decisions based on what they think will generate revenue and attention. Controversial angles get people talking, drive social media engagement, and can lead to increased viewership. From a pure business perspective, this angle is probably working exactly as WWE intended. The risk is that if the angle goes too far and creates significant backlash, it could lead to sponsor concerns or mainstream media criticism. WWE is a publicly traded company now, which means they have to consider how their storylines might be perceived by investors, sponsors, and mainstream audiences. But WWE also knows that wrestling fans have short memories. Controversial angles that seem shocking in the moment are often forgotten within a few months once the storyline concludes. If this angle leads to great matches and a satisfying conclusion, most of the controversy will be forgiven. The merchandise potential for Seth and Becky as a united front against the Bloodline is significant. Us Against the World t-shirts, Fighting Family slogans, and other merchandise tying into their family defending themselves could be big sellers. That commercial potential likely influenced WWE's decision to do this angle. The historical pattern is that personal, controversial angles work from a business perspective even if they're criticized. The Katie Vick angle was universally panned but happened during a successful period for WWE. The Edge/Lita/Matt Hardy angle was controversial but drew ratings. Controversy sells in wrestling. Business impact question: will this angle increase or decrease WWE's viewership and revenue? Comment increase or decrease with your business prediction. Let's talk about Becky Lynch specifically and what this angle does for her character. Becky has been somewhat directionless since returning from her pregnancy, cycling through various feuds without a clear long-term story. This angle gives Becky purpose and motivation that's been missing. Fighting to defend her family and protect her daughter's name is the most sympathetic position Becky could be in as a character. It's universally relatable and makes Becky the ultimate babyface fighting for something more important than championships or accolades. This is personal, and personal is always more compelling. The danger is that by tying Becky so closely to Seth's storyline, she risks becoming Seth's wife rather than her own character. Becky Lynch is too talented and too over to be relegated to supporting role in someone else's story. WWE needs to make sure Becky gets her own moments and victories in this angle. The ideal scenario is that this angle elevates both Seth and Becky as individuals while also establishing them as a powerful couple. They should both get important matches, both get significant moments, and both come out of this looking strong. That's the only way this angle fully succeeds. Becky's promo work in this angle has been outstanding and reminds everyone why she became one of the biggest stars in wrestling. The passion, the intensity, the authenticity in her voice, that's the man that fans fell in love with. If this angle leads to a revitalized Becky Lynch run, it'll be worth the controversy. Becky's role question: should Becky have her own storyline within this angle or should she primarily support Seth? Comment own story or support Seth with what you think serves Becky's character best. Seth Rollins' character evolution through this angle is fascinating because we're seeing a different side of Seth. Gone is the flashy, theatrical visionary character. In its place is a serious, protective father and husband who's willing to go to war for his family. That character depth makes Seth more relatable. Seth has been one of WWE's most consistent performers for over a decade, but he's also been in danger of becoming stale. Every top star needs reinvention periodically, and this angle might be the reinvention Seth needs to feel fresh and relevant again. Personal stakes create investment that championship stakes sometimes can't. The physical limitations Seth is dealing with due to his injury history actually adds to this storyline rather than detracting from it. Heyman's comments about Seth being broken down aren't completely wrong, and Seth fighting despite his physical limitations makes him more heroic. He's sacrificing his body for his family. The potential for Seth to have a career-defining run as the protective family man fighting against the Bloodline is real. This could be the story that people remember Seth for years from now. It has the personal stakes, the powerful opponents, and the clear motivation that great wrestling stories require. Seth's partnership with Becky also allows for creative match types and storytelling opportunities that wouldn't exist if Seth was working alone. Mixed tag matches, simultaneous separate matches, one person at ringside supporting the other, all of these create variety and freshness. Seth's evolution question: is this protective father character the best version of Seth Rollins? Comment yes, more depth, or no, prefer visionary, with which Seth character you prefer. Paul Heyman's role in this entire situation is crucial because Heyman is the instigator who needs to face consequences. The problem is that Heyman is a non-wrestler who can't just be beaten up without it feeling like overkill. So how does Heyman get his comeuppance in a way that feels satisfying? One option is that Seth eventually gets his hands on Heyman and delivers some kind of physical retribution. But it has to be done carefully so Heyman doesn't look too vulnerable or lose his effectiveness as a character. Perhaps Seth traps Heyman in a situation where the Bloodline can't protect him. Another option is that Heyman's words come back to haunt him in some way. Maybe his comments drive a wedge between him and Roman Reigns. Maybe another Bloodline member disagrees with Heyman crossing that line. Internal conflict within the Bloodline created by Heyman's actions could be compelling. A third option is that Heyman is forced to apologize publicly for his comments as part of a stipulation for a match. Making Heyman eat his words and admit he was wrong could be more satisfying than physical revenge. It would be a different kind of retribution that protects Heyman physically while still giving Seth and Becky satisfaction. The risk with Heyman is that if he faces too severe consequences, it diminishes his value as a character. Heyman needs to maintain his mystique and his edge. He can't become a punching bag or someone who regularly gets humiliated. The balance between consequences and protection is delicate. Heyman consequences question: how should Paul Heyman pay for his comments? Comment: physical revenge, forced apology, internal conflict, or suggest your own idea for how Heyman gets his comeuppance. The potential match combinations coming from this angle are exciting to think about. Seth Rollins vs Roman Reigns is the obvious big match, and they have history that makes it immediately compelling. These two could main event a premium live event and deliver something special. Becky Lynch vs. who? That's the question, because there aren't currently prominent female members of the Bloodline. Does WWE bring in someone? Does Becky face a male Bloodline member in an intergender match? Does she face someone aligned with the Bloodline but not officially a member? A mixed tag match with Seth and Becky vs Roman and a female partner could be incredible. It creates a unique match type that we don't see often. It allows both Seth and Becky to shine, and it creates a scenario where the Bloodline can lose without directly hurting Roman's position. A War Games match with Seth and Becky, plus allies, versus the Bloodline at Survivor Series could be the ultimate payoff. War Games is designed for faction warfare, and this angle feels like it's building to exactly that type of match. Multiple people on each side allows for complex storytelling. Whatever matches come from this angle, they need to deliver because the build-up has been so intense. If the payoff matches don't live up to the dramatic setup, the entire angle will feel like a disappointment. WWE has created expectations that they now need to meet. Match predictions question: what's the first match that should come from this angle? Comment your match prediction with who faces who and where it should happen. Final big question before we wrap up: rate the appropriateness of this entire angle on a scale of 1 to 10. Comment your number, where 1 means completely inappropriate and unethical and 10 means perfectly fine and great storytelling. I want to see the full spectrum of opinions. The bottom line is this: Seth Rollins is demanding answers after Paul Heyman made controversial comments about Seth and Becky Lynch's family, and this has created one of the most divisive and talked about angles in recent WWE history. Whether you think this is brilliant storytelling or crossing ethical lines, you cannot deny that this has everyone engaged and invested. This is the kind of personal, intense storytelling that creates memorable wrestling moments. The risk is real, the controversy is genuine, and the payoff potential is massive. WWE has committed to this direction, and now they need to see it through to a satisfying conclusion. Subscribe to Wrestling Newsletter for daily updates on this explosive situation. Hit that like button if you have strong opinions about this angle, whether positive or negative, and turn on notifications so you don't miss how this develops. Share this video with every wrestling fan who needs to weigh in on this controversy. Seth Rollins is ready for war, Becky Lynch is ready to fight, and Paul Heyman has started something that's going to have major consequences for everyone involved. This is personal, this is intense, and this is must-watch television regardless of how you feel about the ethics. Let's see where this goes. Let's go.